Everything you know about self-control is backwards. You think you must master your mind to master your emotions. You believe willpower conquers desire, that consciousness subdues the unconscious. But I'll tell you what decades of clinical work revealed. Your breath is already in conversation with forces you cannot see, negotiating with drives you cannot name, translating between your animal body and your civilized mask. You don't need to control this conversation. You need to join it. The breath doesn't obey because you command it. It obeys because you finally stop abandoning it. Stop fighting it. Stop pretending you're separate from the very force that animates you. Talk to your breath, and you talk to the deepest part of yourself. You think your anxiety lives in your mind, don't you? You believe your rage hides in memories, your sadness in circumstances beyond your control. But what if I told you that every emotion you've ever felt, every fear, every desire, every unspoken wound, is breathing itself into existence right now, in this very moment? You've been taught to analyze your thoughts, to excavate your past, to understand your psyche. But you've never been told the most obvious truth. Your breath is not just keeping you alive. It is sculpting your unconscious mind with every inhale, every pause, every suppressed exhale. The revolution you seek isn't in some distant breakthrough. It's in the rhythm moving through your chest right now. Before we begin this journey together, I want to ask something simple. If you find value in what we explore here today, if even one insight shifts something within you, consider subscribing to this channel. And I'm genuinely curious. Leave a comment telling me what city you're in and what time you're watching this. I find it remarkable that we can share this intimate space across time and distance. Knowing where you are as you breathe these words makes this feel less like a lecture and more like what it should be. Conversation between two conscious beings seeking truth. Now, let's discover what your breath has been trying to tell you all along. I want to talk to you today about something you've been doing since the moment you were born. Something so fundamental that you've stopped noticing it entirely. And in that stopping, in that forgetting, lies the root of almost everything you struggle with. You feel disconnected from yourself, don't you? Like you're watching your life from behind glass, like there's a film between you and your actual experience. Sometimes emotions overwhelm you, crashing over you without warning like waves you never saw coming, and other times you feel nothing at all, just a strange numbness where aliveness should be, where joy or sadness or anything should be, but there's just this flatness, this distance. Both of these are prisons. And I've spent 50 years watching people suffer in them, watching intelligent, capable, beautiful human beings live half-lives because they've lost touch with the most basic thing that makes them alive. You've tried things, haven't you? Maybe you've been in therapy, sitting across from someone week after week, talking about your childhood, your relationships, your fears, excavating memories, and analyzing patterns. Maybe you've tried meditation, sitting there trying to empty your mind while it races faster than ever, feeling like you're failing at something that should be simple. Maybe you've read books about positive thinking, filled journals with gratitude lists, tried to reprogram yourself with affirmations and visualizations, and some of it helps for a while. You have good days. You have insights. You feel better. But something still feels locked away, doesn't it? Something still feels unreachable. Like there's a deeper part of you that remains behind walls you can't quite break through. You know there's depth within you. You can sense it. Wisdom, power, life force, love, creativity. All of it there, but somehow inaccessible. It's like knowing there's treasure buried in your backyard, but you've lost the map, or you're digging in all the wrong places, or you're using tools that can't break through the soil, and you're exhausted. Exhausted from managing symptoms instead of touching root causes. exhausted from the same patterns repeating, exhausted from feeling like you should be further along by now, like you should have figured this out already. By the end of our time together, you won't just understand breath intellectually, as another concept to add to your collection of self-help knowledge. You'll possess a direct channel to your unconscious mind. You'll have what I spent decades helping patients discover: immediate access to the forces shaping your reality. Not next year after you've saved enough for that retreat. Not after you've read enough books or done enough therapy sessions. Right now. Today. In this moment. Because your breath is happening right now, and it's speaking right now, and you can learn its language starting right now. Let me tell you what most people misunderstand, because this misunderstanding keeps millions of people stuck. They think breathing is just a relaxation technique. You're stressed, someone tells you take some deep breaths, you breathe in and out a few times, you calm down a bit, you feel better. And yes, breath can calm you, that's real, that works. But that's like saying the ocean is useful because you can float in it. Technically true, but you're missing the depth, the power, the entire world beneath the surface. You're standing in the shallows thinking you know the ocean. Breath is the language of your unconscious, not a metaphor, not a poetic exaggeration. Literally, the language. Every pattern, every rhythm, every restriction, every flow tells a story about what you're avoiding, what you're protecting, what you're longing for, what you're denying, what you're becoming. Your breath is speaking all the time, broadcasting your inner and state with more honesty than your words ever could. You've just never learned to listen. You've been having a conversation with yourself your entire life and only hearing half of it, only the verbal half, missing the deeper communication happening in every breath you take. Here's another thing people get profoundly wrong, and this one keeps people trapped for decades. They believe that understanding their problems intellectually will free them. If I can just figure out why I'm anxious, if I can trace it back to my childhood, if I can understand the pattern, then I'll be free. And so, you analyze, you interpret, you construct elaborate narratives about your life, beautiful, intelligent, sophisticated narratives. You know exactly why you are the way you are. You can explain your attachment style, your defense mechanisms, your core wounds. You've got it all mapped out, but nothing changes. You know why? Because the unconscious doesn't speak in words. It doesn't care about your narratives. It speaks in sensation, in rhythm, in the tightness in your chest, in the breath you're holding right now without knowing it. It speaks in the language of the body, and the body doesn't understand your explanations. Insight without embodiment changes nothing. You can understand your cage perfectly, know every bar, trace the history of how it was built, analyze the materials it's made from, and still be completely trapped inside it. Understanding is not the same as freedom. I've had patients who could give TED Talks about their trauma, brilliant people who understood their psychology better than some therapists, and they were still suffering. Still stuck in the same patterns, still unable to change. Not because they didn't understand enough, but because they understood too much and felt too little. They'd intellectualized their way out of their bodies entirely. And then there's this belief that healing takes forever, that transformation is this slow, painful, expensive process, reserved for those with resources and time. You need years of therapy. You need to do the deep work. You need retreats and workshops and certifications. Maybe in 10 years you'll be different. Maybe after enough investment you'll finally arrive at some healed state. But here's what I discovered in my clinical work. What I saw again and again with patients who actually transformed. Your breath is happening now, not in the future, now. The unconscious is accessible now, not after years of preparation. Now. Transformation begins the moment you stop narrating your life and start inhabiting it. Not tomorrow when you're more ready. Not after you've prepared more. Now, in this breath, in this moment. I didn't set out to study breath. That wasn't my intention at all. I set out to understand why humans suffer despite having everything they need to be whole. Why do people with every advantage, every resource, every reason to be happy, still end up in despair? Why does the human mind torture itself? Why do we create our own suffering when we could choose otherwise? I spent decades in consulting rooms across Vienna, listening to dreams that made no sense, analyzing slips of the tongue that revealed hidden desires, watching the body produce mysterious symptoms that no doctor could explain, paralyses with no physical cause, blindness that would come and go, pain that moved around the body following no anatomical logic. The body speaking what the mouth couldn't say. And what I found again and again was this: the unconscious reveals itself most clearly in what we cannot fake. You can control what you say. You rehearse conversations, choose your words carefully, manage your image. You can control your facial expressions to some degree, put on the appropriate social mask. You can even control much of your body language if you're paying attention. But your breath bypasses all those defenses. You can consciously change it for a moment, sure, but the moment you stop paying attention, it returns to its unconscious pattern. And that pattern tells the truth. It predates language. It connects you to the infant you were before you learned to speak, before you learned to lie, before you learned what feelings were acceptable and which ones needed to be hidden. It connects you to the animal you still are beneath all that civilization, the mammal that breathes with fear and desire and pure aliveness. It connects you to the wise body that knows what your mind refuses to accept. Think about it for a moment. When someone asks, "How are you?" and you say, "Fine," but your breath is shallow and held, which one is telling the truth? When you say you're not angry, but your breath is sharp and rapid in your upper chest, which one is lying? When you claim you're over something, but your breath catches every time it comes up, who are you fooling? Not your body. Your body knows. So let me show you the contrast between where you are now and where you're heading through this work. Right now, if you're like most people, you're living from your neck up. You're residing in your thoughts, in your narratives, in your understanding and analysis. You're thinking about your breath, thinking about your body, thinking about your emotions, but you're not with them. You're in your head observing your life instead of in your body living it. Your emotions are mysterious forces that attack without warning. Anxiety comes out of nowhere, depression descends like weather, anger erupts unexpectedly. You don't see them coming. You don't understand where they're from. They feel like they're happening to you, like you're a victim of your own inner life. And so, you try to manage them with your mind, talk yourself down, rationalize, think your way through. Sometimes it works a little, mostly it doesn't. Your body is something you manage, medicate, or ignore. It's a vehicle for your head. It's a source of inconvenient needs and uncomfortable sensations. It gets sick and you resent it. It gets tired and you push through. It tries to tell you things and you override it with willpower or coffee or distraction. You're at war with your own biology, trying to transcend it or at least control it enough that it doesn't interfere with what you're trying to accomplish. It's like living in a beautiful house but only ever using the attic. You've got this whole structure, all these rooms, all this space, but you've confined yourself to the smallest, most limited part of it. And from up there in the attic, in your head, you're trying to manage everything below. Control it all from a distance, never quite connecting with the life that's happening in the rest of the house. But where you're going through this work, everything shifts fundamentally. Your breath becomes a living dialogue with your unconscious, not something you think about, but something you participate in. You ask your breath questions and it answers. You listen to your breath and it guides you. You breathe with your emotions instead of trying to think them away, and in that breathing they transform from enemies into information, from problems into energy. Anxiety stops being this terrible thing that attacks you and becomes a signal. Your breath is telling you something. What am I afraid of? What am I not acknowledging? What truth am I running from? The anxiety doesn't necessarily disappear, but your relationship with it completely changes. You're not a victim of it anymore. You're in dialogue with it. Depression becomes visible in your breath before it overtakes you. You notice your breathing getting shallow, restricted, lifeless. And instead of waiting until you're fully submerged in it, you can meet it early. Breathe space into it. Ask what it's about. What am I grieving? What have I not let myself feel? What am I exhausted from holding? Your body becomes the wisest therapist you've ever had. It's not something to overcome or manage. It's the instrument through which you perceive truth. It knows things before your mind catches up. It tells you when something is right or wrong faster than you can analyze it. You learn to trust the wisdom of sensation, the intelligence of the organism that's been keeping you alive since before you could think. You stop seeking answers outside yourself because you've found the question asker within. Not that you don't learn from others, not that you don't need support or wisdom from teachers, but the fundamental answers you've been looking for, the ones about who you are and what you need and what's true for you. You discover those aren't out there. They're in here, in the body, in the breath, in the unconscious that's been broadcasting all along if you would just tune in to the right frequency. You descend from the attic. You inhabit the whole house. You discover that life isn't something to be managed from your head, but something to be lived from your entire being, from the thinking mind and the feeling heart and the breathing belly and the rooted body all together, all integrated, all communicating, all alive. So let me take you on a journey now, not through abstract theory, but through the breathing body itself, through stories that will show you what I mean. We'll begin with a story that changed everything for me, that planted the seed for everything I would come to understand about the human psyche. I was a boy in Vienna, maybe 9 or 10 years old. My family was respectable, educated, the kind of family that mattered in our social circles. We had dinners with starched white tablecloths and conversations about literature and philosophy and the important events of the day. Everything was civilized. Everything was proper. Everything was controlled. The way you held your fork, the topics you could discuss, the emotions you could show, the volume of your voice, all of it prescribed, regulated, contained. This is what it meant to be refined, to be cultured, to be above the animals, and I couldn't breathe. Not literally, you understand. My lungs worked perfectly fine. No doctor could find anything wrong. But I would wake in the night with this suffocating feeling, this crushing weight on my chest, like someone was sitting on me, pressing down, cutting off my air. I would sit up, gasping, heart pounding, terrified, not understanding what was happening to me. Was I dying? Was something physically wrong that the doctors were missing? My parents would hear me and come to my room. "Nothing's wrong," they would say. "It's just your imagination, just nerves, just childish fears. Go back to sleep, be calm, be quiet, be good." And I would try. God, how I would try. I would lie there in the dark, forcing myself to breathe slowly, quietly, carefully, trying to be the calm, controlled boy they wanted me to be, trying not to be a problem, trying not to let my body betray me with its inconvenient panic. But the more I tried to control it, the worse it got. The tightness would spread from my chest to my throat, and I would feel like I was drowning in air, surrounded by oxygen, but unable to take it in, like there was some invisible barrier between me and the life force I needed. I would lie there for hours sometimes, rigid, controlled, suffocating, waiting for morning when I could put on my clothes and my manners and pretend everything was fine. Now, looking back with decades of understanding, with years of helping others with the same struggle, I know exactly what was happening. I was learning what every civilized child learns, what you learn too, whether you remember it or not. That being acceptable, being lovable, being safe means holding yourself in. The corseted life, both literal for the women in my world whose ribs were compressed by whalebone and silk, and metaphorical for all of us. Don't be too loud, you'll disturb people. Don't want too much, it's greedy. Don't feel too deeply, it's excessive. Contain your animal nature, suppress your wildness. Hold yourself in acceptable bounds. And how do you hold yourself in? How do you contain what's uncontainable? You hold your breath. Not dramatically, not all at once, not in a way anyone would notice. Just a little. Just slightly. Just enough to keep the wildness down, to keep the unacceptable parts of yourself locked away in the basement where they can't embarrass you or get you in trouble. Every time I felt anger at the rigid rules, I held my breath. Every time I felt fear that I couldn't express, I held my breath. Every time I felt desire for something I wasn't supposed to want, I held my breath. Every time I felt joy that was too big, too exuberant, too much, I held my breath. And over time, held breath became my normal. Shallow, restricted, controlled breathing became my baseline. My body learned to live on rationed air because full breathing meant full feeling, and full feeling was dangerous. My chest tightness wasn't medical, it was psychological. It was my body rebelling against the prison I was building for myself, breath by held breath. It was my organism screaming in the only way it could that this isn't sustainable. You cannot live on sips of air. You need to breathe fully, or you will suffocate from the inside. But I didn't understand this yet. I couldn't. I was just a child. I just thought I was broken, anxious, weak. Wrong somehow. And here's the really insidious part. The more anxious I became about my breathing, the more I tried to control it, which made the problem worse, which made me more anxious, which made me control it more. A perfect loop of suffering that fed itself. This is what anxiety does. It makes you try to control the thing that needs to be freed, and the controlling perpetuates exactly what you're trying to escape. I carried this pattern for years, through adolescence, through university, into my early career. This underlying tension, this sense that I couldn't quite breathe fully, that there was some restriction I couldn't name. I learned to live with it. You learn to live with anything if you think you have no choice. But I didn't understand the pattern, didn't understand what it meant, until I met a patient who showed me that this wasn't just my personal struggle. It was the struggle, the human struggle, the price we all pay for civilization. Her name was Bertha, though history knows her as Anna O. The patient whose case birthed psychoanalysis itself, who showed me and my colleague Breuer something we'd never seen before. She came to us with symptoms that baffled every doctor she'd seen. And Vienna had excellent doctors. Paralysis in her limbs that appeared and disappeared with no physical cause. Speech difficulties, times when she couldn't speak at all or could only speak in English instead of her native German. Hallucinations, severe mood swings from profound depression to manic agitation. She was suffering terribly and no one could help her. Every medical test came back normal, there was nothing physically wrong, and yet she was clearly, profoundly unwell. I began working with her, sitting with her, listening to her, and what I noticed first, even before I understood what I was seeing, were her breathing patterns. When she tried to speak about certain topics, her breath would catch, literally stop mid-sentence like she'd hit an invisible wall. When memories of her father's illness came up, when she talked about nursing him through his final days, she would begin breathing rapidly, almost hyperventilating, and then suddenly hold her breath for long, painful seconds, her face going pale. Her paralysis, I began to notice, often corresponded with held breath. Her arm would freeze, become completely immobile, and when I looked closely, I could see that her breathing had become shallow and restricted, all high in her chest. When her leg was paralyzed, same thing. The breath pattern changed, locked, and the body part couldn't move, as if the held breath was somehow holding the limb captive. We began what became known as the talking cure. This revolutionary idea that speaking about your troubles could heal you. But I think that name misses something crucial, something we didn't fully understand at the time, but that I came to see over decades of work. Yes, she talked. Yes, she spoke about things she'd never been allowed to speak about. Her anger at her father for dying and leaving her. Her resentment about being a woman in a world that gave women no real choices, no real power, no real voice. Her desires that society said were inappropriate for a good girl to have. Her grief that had nowhere to go, no acceptable outlet, no permission to be fully felt. But here's what nobody talks about, what the histories miss. When she could finally speak her truth, her breath unlocked first, not the other way around. She didn't think her way to better breathing. She didn't understand herself and then breathe freely. She breathed first, and then the understanding could come. I would watch her in sessions, and I could see the exact moment it happened. Something would shift. Her breath would deepen, move lower in her body, drop from her tight chest down into her belly. And then, only then, would the words come. Words that had been trapped, sometimes for years, would pour out on the exhale. She would speak about her father's death and sob, great heaving sobs that shook her entire body, breaths so deep and ragged they seemed to come from her very core. And after, the paralysis in her arm would ease. She would speak about her rage at being confined to the role of dutiful daughter, breathe fire, and her speech would return, clear and strong. She would express desires she'd been taught to be ashamed of, breathe into the forbidden places, and the hallucinations would fade. Her hysterical symptoms, I realized, weren't just mental. They weren't just about repressed thoughts or forbidden desires, though those were part of it. They were breath held hostage, unspeakable experience. Every time she tried to hold something in, to be proper, to be good, to be the acceptable daughter that society demanded, her breath would lock around the feeling, seal it in, build a wall of restricted breathing around the truth that couldn't be spoken. And her body, wise as bodies are, would create symptoms to force the truth out anyway. If she wouldn't speak her anger, her voice would disappear. If she wouldn't move toward what she desired, her legs would refuse to move at all. If she wouldn't look at what was real, she would see things that weren't there instead. The symptoms were the unconscious trying desperately to communicate what consciousness wouldn't acknowledge. When she learned to breathe with her truth instead of against it, when she could let the breath carry the feeling instead of blocking it, the symptoms began to dissolve. Not instantly, not magically, but progressively, steadily. The paralysis eased, the speech returned, the hallucinations faded, the mood stabilized. It wasn't that we cured her by talking. We freed her by helping her breathe with what was real, instead of holding her breath against it. This case opened a question that haunted me for decades, that became the driving question of my entire career. What are we all not saying, and how is it suffocating us? What truths are locked inside us, walls of held breath built around them? What feelings have we deemed unacceptable, and what is that costing us? I began paying obsessive attention to breath in all my patients. The man who came to me drowning in anxiety, I noticed he never fully exhaled. always holding something in reserve, never quite letting go, like he was perpetually bracing for the next attack. His inhales were fine, normal even, but every exhale stopped short, kept something back. He was living on yesterday's stale air, never quite emptying, never quite creating space for anything new. The woman with depression who could barely get out of bed, she barely breathed at all. These tiny, shallow sips of air, so subtle you could hardly see her chest move, as if she didn't quite believe she deserved to take up space, to draw in life, to expand. She was making herself as small as possible, breathing like someone trying not to be noticed, trying not to exist too much. The patient who couldn't stop talking, words pouring out in an endless stream, breath rapid and high in the chest, running from silence like silence would destroy him. He would speak over me, speak over himself, fill every gap with sound. Why? Because in silence he would have to feel, and feeling was terrifying. So he talked and talked and talked, breathing shallowly and rapidly, staying on the surface, never dropping down into the depth where the real things lived. I started tracking patients' breathing during dream analysis, one of my primary techniques. Different dream content created different breath rhythms, as predictable as different music creating different movements. Sexual dreams would make the breath deep and low, primal, sometimes embarrassingly obvious. You could see it in the flush on their face, the quickening pulse, the deep belly breathing of arousal even as they tried to describe the dream clinically. Anxiety dreams would fragment the breath, make it irregular and catching, matching the disconnected, threatening quality of the dream itself. One breath shallow, the next deep, then a held breath, then rapid breathing, no pattern, no rhythm, just chaos. The breath mimicking the dream's anxiety. Wish fulfillment dreams, the pleasant ones where you get what you want, would create this peaceful, even rhythm like a child sleeping safely, like someone who has no reason to brace or defend or hold back. Deep, slow, regular breaths, the breathing of safety and satisfaction. There was one patient I'll never forget, a businessman in his 40s who came to me for what he called his irrational fears. He was afraid of success, he said, which made no sense to him. Every time he was about to close a major deal, land a big client, step into the next level of achievement, he would sabotage himself, make a critical error, say the wrong thing, somehow snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. It was ruining his career, his marriage, his sense of himself as competent and capable. As he told me about his life, his breath was smooth, controlled, perfectly even. The breath of a man in complete control of himself and his narrative. He described his childhood, his education, his career trajectory, all with this measured, reasonable tone and this measured, reasonable breathing. But when I asked about his marriage, something shifted, something subtle, but I'd been watching breath for years by this point. I saw it. His breath became shallow, held, just slightly, just enough. He said everything was fine. His wife was wonderful. They had a good life together, no complaints. But his breath said he was lying, not to me, to himself. He didn't even know he was lying. His conscious mind believed every word. But his breath knew better. I pointed it out. I said, "Did you notice what just happened to your breathing when I asked about your marriage?" He hadn't. Of course he hadn't. No one ever does. We are so profoundly disconnected from our bodies that we can be suffocating ourselves and not even know it, betraying ourselves with every breath and remaining completely oblivious. We sat with it. I asked him to think about his wife while paying attention to his breath. Just think about her, picture her, feel whatever you feel, and notice what your breath does. He tried, and he couldn't breathe deeply. Literally couldn't. Every inhale would catch halfway, hit some invisible ceiling, and he'd have to stop. He tried to force it, push through, and his chest would tighten, panic would rise. So he'd stop, breathe shallow, stay safe. That's when the truth started to emerge. Not in words first, in sensation. Fear in his chest, anger in his throat, sadness behind his ribs, pressure building with nowhere to go. And then, slowly, carefully, the story. The marriage he'd never really wanted. The proposal he'd made because it was time, because she was appropriate, because it made sense, not because he was choosing her from his deepest truth. The life he'd built because it was expected, not because it was his. The part of himself he'd buried so deep he'd forgotten it existed. The part that wanted something different, something wilder, something more real. And his self-sabotage? It was that buried part trying to destroy the life built on lies. His unconscious refusing to let him succeed in a game he'd never actually agreed to play. The breath he couldn't take around his marriage was the same breath he couldn't take around success, because success meant cementing himself into this life forever, and some part of him would rather fail than do that. All of it locked in place by the breath he wouldn't breathe. And we worked with it over months, helping him first breathe with the truth, then speak it, then eventually, painfully, restructure his life in alignment with it. Not easy. Not simple, but necessary. Because you cannot heal what you cannot breathe with. These stories taught me something that changed everything I thought I knew about the human mind, about suffering, about healing. The unconscious isn't some mysterious realm that requires years of specialized training to access. It's not locked away in some vault that only therapy can open. It's breathing through you right now. Every moment, every single moment of your life. Your unconscious is expressing itself through your breath, broadcasting its contents, speaking its truth, waiting for you to notice, waiting for you to listen. But here's the part almost nobody tells you, the part that changes everything once you understand it. The unconscious isn't some mysterious realm you need a specialist to access, some locked room that requires special keys. It's available right now, in this breath, in the next breath, in every breath. You don't need to lie on a couch for years. You don't need to excavate every childhood memory. You don't need to understand everything before you can heal anything. You need to breathe, consciously, honestly, fully, and let your breath show you what's there. Let me teach you how to read the language your breath is already speaking. Your breath moves through 3 domains, 3 chambers of being, and most people only ever use one of them, maybe 2 if they're lucky. Think of it like a house with 3 floors, a basement, a main floor, and an upper floor. And most people live their entire lives in the upper floor, the attic, not even knowing the rest of the house exists, not even knowing they could inhabit so much more space. The upper chest, that's the attic. That's where you breathe when you're managing your image. When you're trying to be who you think you should be, it's shallow, controlled, civilized. This is the breath of the mask you show the world. The professional breath, the polite breath, the I'm fine breath. There's nothing wrong with it. You need it sometimes. Society requires it. But if it's the only way you breathe, if you're living up there in the attic all the time, you're using a tiny fraction of your capacity. You're living in the smallest room of your house and thinking that's all there is. Watch someone in a job interview, in a first date, in any situation where they're performing, managing impression. The breath is up high, in the upper chest, shallow, controlled. They're not letting themselves be fully present, fully alive. They're managing, controlling, showing only the acceptable parts. Then there's the middle chest, the heart space, the main floor of the house. This is where your emotions live when you're willing to half acknowledge them. It's deeper than the mask, but still guarded. You feel things here, but you don't quite let them run wild. This, the breath of emotions you're willing to admit to, but not fully surrender to. Sadness you'll acknowledge, but not let yourself sob about. Anger you'll admit, but not let yourself rage about. Joy you'll feel, but not let yourself be overwhelmed by. This is where most people live most of the time. Feeling, but carefully. Alive, but managed. Present, but defended. It's deeper than the attic. More real, more alive. But it's still restricted, still controlled, still keeping the really wild stuff locked away. And then there's the belly, the deep abdomen, the basement, where the unconscious breathes when you let it. This is primal breath, animal breath, infant breath. No control, no management, just pure life force moving through you. This is where truth lives beneath words, where your body knows things your mind hasn't figured out yet, where healing happens not because you understand it, but because you allow it. Watch a baby breathe. Their belly rises and falls with every breath, their whole body involved, no restriction, no control. They haven't learned yet that some breaths are acceptable and others aren't. They haven't learned to hold themselves in, to make themselves small, to breathe carefully. They just breathe with everything they have, or watch someone in deep grief, really grieving, surrendered to it. The breath drops into the belly, becomes these great heaving sobs that shake the entire body, or someone in ecstasy, in pleasure, in joy that's bigger than they can control. The breath goes deep, low, full, the whole belly expanding and contracting. This is where real transformation happens. Not in the attic, not even on the main floor. In the basement. In the primal place where you're still an animal, still connected to the life force that has nothing to do with your civilized ideas about who you should be. Now think of your breath like an iceberg. You manage the tip, that little bit showing above water. Your conscious breathing, the shallow, controlled breath you use most of the time. But the massive bulk below the surface, the unconscious breathing pattern, that's what's actually determining your course. That's what's steering your life. You can spend your whole life trying to control the tip, managing your conscious mind, thinking positive thoughts, forcing yourself to behave differently, and you'll keep ending up in the same places, crashing into the same icebergs, wondering why nothing really changes. Or you can dive down, meet the depth, meet the unconscious pattern in your breath, and discover that the power to change direction was always there. You were just looking in the wrong place. Here's what this means practically, in your actual life. When you're anxious, where are you breathing? Pay attention next time anxiety rises. I guarantee it's high and shallow, up in the chest, rapid and restricted. Maybe you even notice yourself holding your breath periodically. These little interruptions in the flow. That's not a symptom of anxiety. That is anxiety, expressed through breath. Your body is preparing for threat, activating the sympathetic nervous system, keeping you ready to fight or flee. Your breathing becomes rapid to oxygenate your muscles for action. It becomes shallow because deep breathing signals safety, and you're not safe. You're in danger. At least that's what your nervous system believes. And the more you try to control the anxiety with your mind, the more you reinforce the breath pattern that creates it. You think anxious thoughts, your breath gets shallow and rapid, which sends signals to your brain that you're in danger, which creates more anxious thoughts, which makes your breath worse. Around and around, a feedback loop that builds on itself. But if you breathe low, deep, slow, into the belly, anxiety literally cannot maintain itself. Not because you're forcing it away, not because you're suppressing it, but because you're changing the fundamental conversation your body is having with itself. Deep belly breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest system, the system that says you're safe. You're saying, with your breath, with the language the nervous system actually understands, there's no threat here. It's safe to let down. It's safe to receive life fully. You cannot be in full parasympathetic response and full anxiety at the same time. It's physiologically impossible. They're opposite states. So when you breathe deeply, fully, into the belly, you're not fighting anxiety. You're creating the conditions where anxiety cannot exist. Now let me tell you about repression, because this is where it gets really interesting, where you start to see how your entire personality, your entire way of being in the world, is shaped by how you breathe. Every held breath is a held experience. Every shallow breath is a refused feeling. This isn't metaphor, this is mechanism. Think about the last time something upset you. Someone said something hurtful, or you felt that flash of anger, or shame, or fear. What did you do? If you're like most people, like every patient I've ever worked with, you held your breath, just for a second, just long enough to push the feeling down, to not react, to stay in control. That's repression happening in real time. You're using your breath as a lid to keep the unacceptable stuff contained, and it works, for a moment. You don't explode, you don't cry, you don't say what you're really thinking. You stay composed, you keep it together, you maintain your social mask, but that feeling doesn't disappear. It doesn't evaporate just because you refuse to feel it fully. It gets locked in your body, held there, frozen in place, and your breath has to keep restricting to keep it there, to maintain the prison around it. Do this once, and it's fine. Your body can handle it. Do this enough times, thousands of times, tens of thousands of times over a lifetime. With every small hurt, every flash of anger, every moment of fear or shame or desire that you can't express, and you develop a chronic breathing pattern. Shallow, restricted, always slightly held. Your baseline breathing becomes defensive breathing. Your normal breath becomes the breath of someone perpetually bracing against feeling too much. And this creates chronic anxiety. Not because anxious things are happening to you, but because your body is in a constant state of preparation, of holding, of not quite letting go. You're trying to live your life, be present, enjoy things, while also continuously, unconsciously suppressing your life force. It's like trying to drive with the parking brake on. You wonder why you're exhausted all the time. You wonder why life feels like such a struggle. It's because you're using enormous amounts of energy just to keep yourself contained, to keep all those held breaths in place, to maintain all those walls around all those feelings. I saw this most clearly, most dramatically in my work around sexuality, which was the great unspoken territory of my time. Victorian Vienna, where I practiced, was a culture of profound sexual repression. Sexuality was the thing nobody talked about honestly. It was dirty, shameful, something to be controlled and contained, and ideally not felt at all except in very specific sanctioned contexts. And I noticed that my patients who struggled most with sexual repression, who had the most shame and fear around their desires, also had the most restricted breathing, particularly in the lower belly, the pelvis, the root, the areas of the body associated with sexual energy and life force. They would breathe into their chest, maybe their mid-chest if they were really feeling something, but never down into the depths where the sexual energy lives, where the primal desires move, where the animal nature breathes. They couldn't. To breathe fully into the pelvis would be to feel the energy there, to acknowledge the desire, the longing, the life force that society said was shameful, wrong, something to be ashamed of. So they cut off the breath instead. They stopped breathing into those areas of the body, and in cutting off the breath, they cut off access to a huge part of their vitality, their aliveness, their creative life force. Because sexual energy isn't just about sex, it's life force itself. It's creativity, passion, desire, the energy that moves you toward what you want, that propels you into engagement with life. Cut that off, and you cut off so much more than just sexual feeling. You cut off passion for your work, enthusiasm for life, the energy to create, to build, to make things happen. You become tired, depressed, listless, going through the motions, and you have no idea that it's connected to how you're breathing, to the areas of your body you've made unconscious by refusing to breathe into them. But here's what's true everywhere, not just in Victorian Vienna, not just around sexuality. Every culture teaches us to hold back our life force in some way. Maybe it's anger you're not allowed to feel. You were taught that anger is bad, destructive, something that good people don't experience. So every time anger arises, you hold your breath, push it down, refuse it. And you lose access to the healthy aggression you need to protect yourself, to set boundaries, to say no to what's not acceptable. Maybe it's grief you're supposed to get over quickly. Someone dies, you're allowed to be sad for a little while, but then you need to move on, get back to normal, stop dwelling on it. So you hold your breath around your grief. Keep it contained. Don't let yourself really sob, really wail, really let the loss move through you, and it stays stuck inside you. This frozen grief, taking up space, weighing you down, unfinished. Maybe it's joy that you learned is too much, too loud, too wild. You were told to calm down, quiet down, not be so excited, so you learned to restrict your joy, keep it small and manageable, and now you can't quite let yourself feel real happiness. There's always this governor on it, this internal voice saying don't get too excited, something bad might happen. Don't let yourself feel too good. Whatever it is, you learn to restrict your breath, to restrict the feeling. This is how socialization works. This is how you learn to fit into society. You learn which feelings are acceptable and which aren't, and you use your breath to allow the acceptable ones and suppress the unacceptable ones. You become a breathing filter, only letting through what's socially sanctioned. And the tragedy, the real tragedy that I witnessed over and over in my practice is that what you resist persists. The feeling you're trying to breathe around doesn't go away. It doesn't dissolve just because you refuse to acknowledge it. It just goes underground, into the unconscious, where it runs your life from behind the scenes, where you can't see it, but it's controlling everything. The anger you won't breathe with becomes depression. That vital energy turned inward, attacking yourself instead of addressing what's actually wrong in your life. The grief you won't exhale becomes numbness, this deadness inside where aliveness should be. The desire you won't inhale becomes compulsion, acting out in ways you don't understand or control, your repressed desires emerging in distorted forms. Your sexuality gets cut off by restricted breathing, and it doesn't disappear. It becomes an obsession, or it leaks out in inappropriate ways, or it dies entirely, and you wonder why you have no passion for anything. Your anger gets suppressed, and it becomes chronic irritability, or it explodes at inappropriate times over small things, or it becomes depression that you can't shake. But your breath knows. Your breath has been keeping track of everything you've repressed, everything you've refused to feel fully. It knows what you don't know, consciously. It responds to unconscious content before your mind recognizes it, before you have any conscious awareness that something is happening. This is how you can use your breath like you'd use a dream, as a message from the parts of yourself you can't see directly, as a communication from the unconscious that's always happening if you pay attention. Let's say you're having a normal day, going about your business. Everything seems fine consciously, and suddenly you notice your breath has changed. It's gotten shallow, or fast, or you're holding it without knowing why. Nothing's happened consciously to explain it. No one said anything upsetting. You're not thinking about anything particularly stressful, but your breath knows something you don't know yet. If you pay attention, if you stay with the breath and ask it what's happening, ask it what it's responding to, you'll often find that a memory surfaced just below conscious awareness. Something reminded you of something painful, but so subtly you didn't consciously notice. Or you're heading toward a situation that some part of you recognizes as threatening or difficult. You're about to see someone you have unresolved issues with. You're about to have a conversation you're dreading. Your unconscious sees it coming and your breath is already preparing, already bracing, already moving into defense mode. Or an emotion is rising that you habitually suppress. Anger at your partner, fear about your job, grief about something you thought you were over. It's starting to surface, starting to move toward consciousness, and your breath is already trying to push it back down. Hold it in. Keep it unconscious where it's safe. Your breath is an early warning system. It's the smoke before the fire, the tremor before the earthquake. If you learn to read it, if you develop the sensitivity to notice these subtle shifts, you can catch unconscious material before it fully emerges, before it overwhelms you or gets pushed down again into deeper repression. You can meet it halfway, consciously, and work with it, instead of being worked by it. This is why talking about trauma while breathing fully is so fundamentally different from talking about trauma while holding your breath. When you hold your breath while describing something painful, you're recreating the original protective response. Your body goes into the same defensive state it was in when the trauma happened. You're going back into freeze, into numbing, into dissociation. You're reliving the trauma in your body even as you describe it calmly with your mind. This is why people can talk about their trauma for years in therapy and not heal. They're talking about it from a defended state. The words are there, but the breath is held, so the emotion stays locked in the body. Nothing moves, nothing releases. It's like trying to drain a pool while keeping the drain plugged. But when you can breathe fully while speaking the difficult truth, when you can let the breath move all the way through you as you name what happened, as you feel what you felt, you're teaching your nervous system something completely new. You're saying, I can face this and stay present. I can feel this and survive it. I can exhale this story instead of holding it in my body forever. The breath moving creates the possibility of the trauma moving, completing, releasing. Not forgetting it, not pretending it didn't happen, but metabolizing it, integrating it, transforming it from this frozen thing inside you into a story you can tell, a scar that's healed, a part of your history instead of your prison. You don't have a breathing problem, you have an honesty problem your breath is trying to solve. Every restriction, every pattern, every held inhale or incomplete exhale is marking a place where you're not quite truthful with yourself, a place where what you're showing the world doesn't match what you're actually feeling, a place where you're pretending something is okay when it's not, or pretending you don't want something you desperately want. Not because you're a bad person, not because you're deliberately lying, but because being fully honest is terrifying. It means feeling everything, acknowledging everything, letting everything move through you without controlling it, without managing it, without making it smaller or more acceptable than it actually is. Let me tell you about desire, because this is fundamental to understanding the breath and fundamental to understanding yourself. Every desire begins as an inhale. This is not metaphor. This is actual mechanism. Think about it. When you want something, really want it, what do you do physiologically? You draw breath in. You expand. You open to receive. Watch a baby reaching for its mother. They inhale, they expand, their whole body reaches forward. A lover leaning in for a kiss, they breathe in. You seen something beautiful and gasping? That's an inhale of desire, of wanting to take in the beauty, to receive it. The inhale is the movement of desire, of reaching out, of saying yes to life, yes to pleasure, yes to what you want, and every satisfaction, every fulfillment, every completion, is an exhale. The sigh after eating when you're hungry, that deep satisfied exhale. The moan of pleasure during sex or receiving a massage, that's an exhale of satisfaction. The deep breath out when you finally arrive home after a long journey, when you sink into your chair, when you rest into completion. The exhale is release, completion, the letting go that allows satisfaction to land in your body, to be felt, to be real. Without the exhale, without that release, satisfaction can't complete itself. You can get what you want and not feel satisfied if you don't exhale it. Don't let yourself release into the pleasure of having it. But here's what I noticed in patient after patient, year after year. People who are uncomfortable with pleasure, who have shame or guilt around receiving, around having desires, around taking what they want, they can't inhale fully. They want something. They start to breathe in to receive it, and then they cut it off halfway. They restrict it. They stop themselves from fully opening, fully expanding, fully taking in what's being offered. The inhale is tentative, shallow, apologetic. It's like they don't quite believe they deserve to receive what they desire. They don't trust it. They think maybe if they don't want it too much, if they don't open too fully, they won't be disappointed when it's taken away. Or they've learned that wanting things makes you vulnerable, makes you needy, makes you weak. So they've learned to want carefully, to desire in small, manageable ways that can't hurt them. And people who struggle with guilt, who can't let themselves fully enjoy anything, who always have this nagging feeling that they shouldn't be happy when others are suffering, they can't exhale completely. They get what they want, they achieve something, they experience pleasure, and they hold on to the end of the breath. They never quite let it all go, never quite release fully into satisfaction. The exhale is incomplete, interrupted, never quite reaching empty. It's like they can't quite give themselves permission to fully enjoy anything, to fully rest in having what they want. There's always this holding back, this sense that they don't deserve it, or it won't last, or something bad will happen if they let themselves be too satisfied. Think about your own breath right now as you listen to this. Can you inhale all the way, deeply, without restriction, really taking in as much air as your lungs can hold? Or do you stop somewhere in the middle, hit some invisible ceiling that says this is enough, don't be greedy, don't take too much, don't expand too far? And then the exhale. Can you let it all go? Empty completely, release all the way to empty. Trust that the next breath will come when you need it. Or do you hold on to some air? Keep some reserve, as if fully letting go might mean you'll never fill up again, as if complete release is too vulnerable, too dangerous. Your breath patterns reveal what you believe you deserve to receive from life. If you breathe shallowly, taking in just enough to survive, never filling completely, never really receiving fully, you're living in scarcity. Not financial scarcity necessarily, though it might show up there too, but existential scarcity. The belief that there's not enough, that you're not enough. That you better hold back, because wanting fully is dangerous, will lead to disappointment, will make you vulnerable to loss. And if you can't exhale completely, if you're always holding on to something, keeping some reserve, never quite emptying, you're living in fear of loss, holding on to control, to stability, to what you have, terrified that if you let go even for a second, even in a breath, everything will fall apart. You never quite empty, which means you never quite fill. You're trying to live on yesterday's breath, stale air that can't nourish you anymore, but that you won't release because releasing feels like dying. Now let me talk about death, because we have to, because this is the root of everything. The deepest fear, the thing that shapes how you breathe and therefore how you live. Fear of death is fear of the final exhale. It's the ultimate letting go, the complete release with no inhale following, the emptiness that doesn't refill. And we practice it thousands of times a day, every single day of your life. In the pause after each exhale, that moment of emptiness before the next breath begins. It's a little death, a small surrender to the unknown, a brief experience of no breath, no life force, no control. Just emptiness. Just void. Just the space between. Most people rush right past it. They exhale and immediately inhale again, never quite resting in the emptiness, never quite allowing themselves to be with the nothing, because the emptiness is frightening. It feels like death, like absence, like the void, like if you stay there too long, you might never come back. But if you can learn to rest there, even for a second longer than comfortable, even for just a moment of conscious presence in the emptiness, you're learning the great lesson. That emptiness is not death, that nothing is not annihilation, that you can let go completely and still return, still fill again, still live, that the void is not your enemy but the source of all possibility. This is the meditation of conscious exhaling, not breathing exercises where you control the breath in some specific pattern, not techniques or methods or things to master. Just bringing awareness to the exhale and the space after, letting the exhale be complete, really empty, all the way, and then trusting the pause, waiting in the emptiness, not rushing to fill back up, waiting for the inhale to arise naturally, organically, from your body's wisdom rather than from your mind's fear. And it will arise. It always does. The inhale comes when it's time, when your body needs it, from a place of trust rather than fear. This is rehearsal for the final surrender we're all moving toward, the death that's waiting for each of us, the ultimate letting go. If you can't exhale fully in life, you're practicing for a death you're terrified of. If you can learn to release completely, trust the emptiness, rest in the pause, you're practicing for a death you can meet consciously, fully, as the completion it is, rather than the catastrophe you fear. And grief? Let me tell you about grief, because grief is the most honest breathing there is. Grief breathes in sobs, in ragged inhales and long shaking exhales, in sounds that come from so deep you didn't know you had that depth. It's completely uncontrolled, entirely surrendered to the feeling, nothing held back, nothing managed, nothing civilized about it. A grieving person cannot maintain a composed breathing pattern. The body takes over. The breath takes over. It breathes the loss. It breathes the love. It breathes the devastation. Great heaving sobs that shake your entire torso, that make sounds you've never heard yourself make, that leave you exhausted and emptied and somehow clean afterward. This is what grief needs to do. It needs to breathe itself. It needs to move through you in these huge breaths, these enormous exhales that release what cannot be held, what's too big to contain. Grief is love with nowhere to go, and it needs to be breathed out, released, given back to the universe that gave you the person you lost. But we prevent this. We say, don't cry, be strong, get over it, move on. We're uncomfortable with grief, with big emotions, with loss that shows itself so rawly, and we prevent it by controlling the breath. We hold it tight so the sobs can't come. We keep it shallow so the grief can't fully land. We swallow it, literally swallow the emotion with a held breath, force it back down where it won't embarrass us or make others uncomfortable. And then we wonder why we can't heal, why we feel stuck, why the loss stays heavy years later, decades later, why we still choke up at unexpected moments. Because the grief never completed itself. It never breathed itself through. It's still in there, waiting, frozen in place by the breaths you wouldn't let yourself breathe. Let grief breathe, and it will move through you. It will be intense, yes, It will be painful, yes, but it will move. It will complete. It will transform from this frozen weight inside you into something you can carry, something that becomes part of you without crushing you. Hold your breath against it, and it will take up residence inside you forever. A frozen place where life can't flow, where breath can't move, where you're still holding on to someone you need to release. Every loss you haven't breathed is still inside you. Every grief you swallowed instead of sobbing. Every goodbye you didn't let yourself cry about. All of it, waiting for the exhale that will release it. Waiting for permission to complete itself. Waiting for you to finally breathe it through. The wisdom of the pause between breaths, the emptiness after the exhale, is this. You are not the breath. You are the space in which breathing happens. The inhale and exhale are movements within you, processes happening in you, but you are something deeper, something more fundamental. You are the stillness that contains them both, the awareness that witnesses both the filling and the emptying, the life and the death of each breath. In the pause, you can touch that stillness directly. You can rest in being instead of doing. You can remember that you are not just the fear, or the desire, or the grief, or the joy. You are the awareness in which all of these arise and pass away. You are the space itself, and the breath is just weather moving through you, constantly changing, but you remain. This is liberation, not from feeling, but from being controlled by feeling. Not from desire, but from being enslaved by desire. Not from fear, but from being paralyzed by fear. You feel everything, maybe more deeply than ever, but you're no longer identified with it. You're intimate with your experience, but not trapped in it. Now let's go even deeper into practice, because understanding is worthless without application, knowledge is useless without embodiment. These lessons illuminate the landscape, they show you the territory, but you need a map to walk it yourself. You need practices that you can actually do, that will change how you breathe, and therefore change how you live. Here's the first practice, and I want you to start tomorrow morning, not next week, not when you're ready, tomorrow. Before your mind starts narrating your day, before you reach for your phone or check your messages or make your plans or begin the endless internal chatter about what you need to do, spend just 2 minutes in bed simply observing your breath. Not changing it, not improving it, not making it deeper or slower or better. Just watching it, just being with it. Notice where it goes in your body. Does it fill your chest, your belly, just your upper chest? Notice its rhythm. Is it fast, slow, irregular, smooth? Notice its depth. Are you taking big breaths or small sips of air? Notice its quality. Does it feel tight, restricted, free, easy? Just observe, like a scientist studying a phenomenon, like a birdwatcher observing a rare species, with curiosity, not judgment. There's no right way to breathe in this practice. You're just gathering information about how you actually breathe when you're not trying to breathe any particular way. And then, after a minute or so of just observing, ask your breath 3 questions, silently, internally, as you continue to breathe naturally. Don't say them out loud. Just think them, direct them toward your breath, toward your body, toward the unconscious that's already awake, even though your conscious mind is just starting to engage. What are you trying to tell me? What am I holding? What wants to be released? Don't force answers. Don't make anything up. Don't go into your thinking mind and try to figure it out. Just ask and breathe and notice what surfaces. It might be a sensation, a tightness in your chest that you suddenly become aware of, a softness in your belly that feels good, a restriction in your throat that you didn't know was there. It might be a memory that floats up for no apparent reason. something from yesterday or from 20 years ago, just appearing in your awareness without you calling it forth. It might be an image, a face, a place, a moment. Your unconscious responding to your question by showing you something. It might be an emotion you can't quite name, a sadness without obvious cause, an anxiety about something you weren't consciously aware you were worried about, an excitement about something you didn't realize you were looking forward to. Just feeling, arising, without story, without explanation, just pure sensation. Or it might be nothing at all, silence, blankness, no answer. That's okay too. You're not doing this to get specific answers every time. You're doing it to begin the dialogue, to establish the relationship, to tell your unconscious that you're listening, you're here, you want to know what it has to say. The point is creating a conversation between your conscious mind and your unconscious process. You're building a bridge, you're opening a channel, and over time, days or weeks or months of doing this every morning, you'll start to notice patterns. Your breath in the morning tells you things. It shows you what you carried from yesterday into sleep, what you're carrying from sleep into today. It reveals what you're bracing for, what you're excited about, what you're avoiding. Maybe you notice that before difficult work days, your breath is tight and high, even before you consciously remember you have a challenging meeting. Maybe you notice that when you're really happy about something, your belly softens and your breath deepens naturally. Maybe you notice that unresolved conflicts show up as restriction in your throat, as if the words you didn't say are literally blocking your airway. Why does this work? Because you're catching your unconscious before your defenses wake up fully. In that liminal space between sleep and full waking, you're more porous, more open. The walls between conscious and unconscious are thinner. The protective mechanisms you use all day to keep certain things out of awareness, they're not fully online yet. And if you can meet yourself there, breathe with yourself there, you gain access to truth that gets locked away once you fully wake and put on your social mask and start your day. The immediate benefit is you'll notice patterns you've lived with unconsciously for years, decades maybe. The holding in your chest before difficult conversations, the shakiness in your breath when you're anxious about something you haven't consciously acknowledged yet, the deadness in your breathing when you're depressed, when life feels flat and meaningless. You'll see it, and seeing it is the first step to changing it. You cannot change what you cannot see. The second practice is emotional tracking through breath, and this is one you do throughout your day, in real time, as life happens to you. When any strong emotion arises during your day, anger or fear or sadness or even joy, even excitement, immediately bring your attention to your breath before you do anything else, before you react, before you speak, before you try to manage the emotion or make it go away or figure out what to do about it. Just notice, what's happening with my breath right now? Don't try to change the emotion yet. Don't judge yourself for having it. Don't make it wrong. Just notice how it's breathing itself. Has your breath stopped entirely, frozen mid-inhale or mid-exhale like you've hit pause? Has it gotten short and rapid, panting in your chest like a frightened animal? Has it moved up from your belly into your upper chest, gotten shallow and tight? Has it become irregular, catching and starting, no smooth rhythm? Whatever you notice, that's information. That's the emotion expressing itself through your body's most fundamental rhythm, showing you its shape, its intensity, its quality. Anger breathes differently than fear. Sadness breathes differently than shame. Joy breathes differently than anxiety. Your breath is a translator, turning invisible feeling into observable pattern. And this is the key part. This is what makes it transformative. Instead of just observational, breathe with the emotion instead of against it. If you're angry and your breath is sharp and fast and forceful, let it be that way for a moment. Don't immediately try to calm it down. Don't suppress it. Don't civilize it. Match your breath to the intensity of what you're feeling. Let the breath express the anger fully. If you're sad and your breath wants to sob, let it sob. If you're scared and your breath wants to be shallow and fast, let it be shallow and fast for a few breaths. You're not indulging the emotion or wallowing in it. You're honoring it. You're saying, yes, you can be here. I can feel you. I can breathe you. And what happens, almost magically, except it's not magic, it's physiology, is the emotion begins to move. It's not stuck anymore. Not frozen in that first reactive state. You breathed with it instead of holding your breath against it, so it has permission to shift, to transform, to flow. Then, gradually, slowly, with compassion, not force, you can begin to deepen and slow the breath without suppressing the feeling. You're not pushing the anger away. You're giving it more space. You're breathing room into it, literally creating more internal space for the feeling to exist without overwhelming you. With each slightly deeper breath, each slightly slower exhale, you're saying to your nervous system, it's okay. We can feel this and survive it. We don't have to panic. We can hold this much feeling and not break. And the emotion, met with breath instead of resistance, met with space instead of suppression, begins to soften. Not disappear necessarily, but become workable, become fluid, become information and energy instead of overwhelm and crisis. Why does this work? Because you're separating the emotion from your fear of the emotion, and that's where most of your suffering actually lives. The feeling itself is just sensation, just energy moving through your body. It's your terror of the feeling, your attempt to make it go away, your judgment of yourself for having it, that creates the real suffering. When you breathe with the emotion, when you let it be as big as it is, when you stop trying to control it or fix it or make it different, something remarkable happens. It becomes just weather. A storm passing through. Intense, maybe. Powerful, maybe. But temporary. Just weather moving through the landscape of you. The shift you'll experience doing this practice is profound. Emotions stop being these terrible enemies you have to defend against. They become like weather patterns moving through, sometimes pleasant, sometimes uncomfortable, but none of them permanent. All of them just weather. You'll still feel them, sometimes very intensely, but you won't be afraid of them in the same way. You'll know, from direct experience, that you can breathe with whatever arises, and that knowing changes everything about how you meet life. The third practice I call the confession exhale, and this one goes directly to the heart of what we've been talking about, the honesty problem that your breath is trying to solve. Once a day, every single day, find a private moment. It can be in your car before you go into work. It can be in the shower where no one can hear you. It can be on a walk where you're alone. Anywhere you can speak out loud without being heard or interrupted. Think of one small truth you haven't spoken aloud, even to yourself. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It doesn't have to be some huge confession. In fact, start small. Start with something manageable. Something like, I'm angry at my friend for always making everything about herself. Or, I'm scared I'm not good enough at my job and someone's going to figure it out. Or, I resent my partner for this thing they do. Or, I want something I'm ashamed to want. Just one truth, one small thing that's real but unspoken. Take a breath in, a full breath, all the way down into your belly. And on a long, complete exhale, all the way to empty, whisper that truth out loud. Let it ride out on the breath. I'm angry at my friend. I'm scared I'm not good enough. I resent my partner. I want what I'm not supposed to want. Just speak it, release it into the air, let it become sound waves instead of held tension, and then notice what happens in your body. Do you feel relief, a lightening, like you just set down something heavy? Or do you feel fear, a contraction, a sense of danger at having spoken it? Or maybe both at once, relief and fear mixed together. Don't analyze it. Don't make it mean anything. Don't turn it into another story. Just notice the physical response. Your body is giving you feedback about what it feels like to speak truth, about what's at stake in your honesty, about what you've been protecting yourself from by keeping silent. The point isn't to solve anything, or make the truth go away, or figure out what to do about it. The point is to practice voicing what's real, to build the muscle of honesty, to discover through direct experience that speaking truth, even small truth, even truth you're ashamed of, doesn't destroy you. The sky doesn't fall. The ground doesn't open up and swallow you. You speak the truth, and you're still here, still breathing, still alive. Because the unconscious responds to vocal expression in a way it doesn't respond to thought. You can think about your resentments all day and they stay stuck inside you. But speak them out loud, even just whisper them to yourself, and something shifts. Secrets lose their power when they're breathed into sound. They stop being these huge, terrible things hiding in the dark and become just truths. Things that are real, things you can work with, things that don't have to control you from the shadows. Why does this work? Because you're building capacity for larger truths. You start with small confessions, small truths that aren't too scary. I'm annoyed. I'm worried. I'm disappointed. And as you practice, as you notice over days and weeks that speaking these small truths doesn't destroy you, doesn't end your relationships, doesn't make you a bad person, you become capable of speaking bigger truths. Truths about who you really are underneath the mask. What you really want from your life. What you really think about your choices. What you really need to change. What you can no longer tolerate. What you truly desire. These bigger truths become accessible not through more thinking, not through more understanding, but through the practice of speaking smaller truths until your nervous system learns that truth-telling is survivable. What changes over time with this practice is you stop living in fear of yourself. You stop believing that parts of you are so unacceptable, so terrible, so shameful, that they must never see the light of day. You discover that you can face what's true and survive it. You can speak what's real and not be destroyed by it. And that discovery is freedom, real freedom. Not the freedom of having no problems, but the freedom of being able to be honest about the problems you have. The fourth practice is the breath of presence. And this is the one you can do anywhere, anytime, woven into your actual daily life. During any routine activity, any moment when your hands are busy but your mind is free, bring your attention to your breath and count the rhythm. Washing dishes, walking, waiting in line, folding laundry, sitting in traffic, any of these moments. Inhale for a count of 4. Hold for a count of 4. Exhale for a count of 6. Hold empty for a count of 2. Then repeat. 4 in, 4 hold, 6 out, 2 hold. Again and again. The specific counts aren't magic. What matters is that you're creating a pattern that requires attention, that demands your presence, that makes it impossible to be lost in thought while you're doing it. You can't count your breath and be lost in anxious thought at the same time. You can't track the rhythm and also be replaying that conversation from yesterday or rehearsing the one you're dreading tomorrow. The counting brings you here, now, to this breath, this moment, this body. It interrupts the endless internal narrative that usually runs your life. And when your mind wanders, and it will, it absolutely will, don't make yourself wrong. Don't get frustrated. Don't think you're failing. Just notice, where did my mind just go? What was I just thinking about? What pulled my attention away from the breath? This is data. This is gold. This is your unconscious showing you what it's processing, what it's preoccupied with, what it needs you to pay attention to. If your mind keeps wandering to a conversation you need to have, that's information. Your unconscious is telling you this needs your attention. If it keeps going to a decision you're avoiding, you're being shown what needs to be addressed. If it keeps replaying a painful memory, something there needs to be felt, processed, integrated. Your wandering mind isn't the enemy. It's not a sign that you're bad at meditation or that this isn't working. It's a messenger. It's the unconscious trying to get your attention the only way it knows how, by pulling your thoughts toward what matters, toward what's unfinished, toward what needs your conscious awareness. And then, without judgment, without making yourself wrong for wandering, you return to the count. 4 in, 4 hold, 6 out, 2 hold. You come back, again and again. This is the practice. Not never wandering, not perfect focus, just noticing when you've wandered and returning. That return, that moment of choosing to come back to breath, that's where the transformation happens. You're training 2 things at once. You're training presence, the capacity to be here now instead of lost in thoughts about past or future. The ability to inhabit this moment, this breath, this body, this life, as it's actually happening, instead of as you're thinking about it. And you're also training observation, the ability to watch your mind without being controlled by it, to see your thoughts as thoughts rather than as reality. Why does this work? Because you're becoming the observer of your mind instead of its prisoner. You're discovering experientially, not just intellectually, that you are not your thoughts. Thoughts arise. You notice them. They pull your attention. You observe that. You let them pass. You return to breath. Over and over. And in that process you begin to realize something profound. You are the awareness in which thoughts occur, not the thoughts themselves. You're the space, not the weather. You're the sky, not the clouds. The thoughts pass through, sometimes pleasant, sometimes painful, but you remain. This is the foundational insight of consciousness. And once you know this experientially, not just as a concept, but as lived reality, everything shifts. The long-term effect of this practice is you develop what I call the observing ego, a part of you that can watch the rest of you without being swept away. So when anxiety arises, part of you notices, oh, anxiety is here right now. You're not denying it, not suppressing it, but you're also not identified with it. You're not anxiety itself, you're the awareness that notices anxiety is present. When anger comes, part of you sees, anger is moving through right now. When sadness descends, part of you observes, sadness is here. You're intimate with these states, fully feeling them, not detached or dissociated, but you're not consumed by them. You're not defined by them. They're experiences you're having, not who you are. And that makes all the difference. That's the difference between being depressed and noticing depression is present, between being anxious and observing anxiety moving through, between being identified with every passing state and being the spacious awareness that holds all states. It's the difference between drowning and swimming. Same water, completely different experience. These 4 practices, done consistently, not perfectly but consistently, will change your relationship with your breath, and therefore with your unconscious, and therefore with your entire life. They're not techniques to master, they're not exercises to perfect, they're invitations to return home to yourself, over and over, breath by breath, day by day. Some days they'll feel profound, like you're touching something deep and true and transformative. Some days they'll feel like nothing is happening, like you're just going through motions, like you're wasting your time. It doesn't matter. The point isn't the experience you have while doing them. The point is the cumulative effect of choosing, day after day, to be with your breath, to listen to your body, to honor what's real. You're not practicing to get somewhere else, to achieve some special state, to become someone different. You're practicing to be here more fully, to inhabit your actual life instead of the story you tell about your life, to breathe with what is instead of holding your breath, waiting for what should be. And this is where everything changes, not because you've fixed yourself, not because you've overcome your problems, not because you've achieved some permanent state of enlightenment or healing, but because you've discovered that you can breathe with whatever arises, and in that discovery lies a freedom that doesn't depend on your circumstances being perfect. So, what have we discovered together in this journey we've been on? Let me bring it all together now, distill everything down to its essence, give you something you can carry with you when the details fade. Not that breath is important. You already knew that. Everyone knows breath is important. That's obvious. Trivial even. We've discovered something far more radical, far more transformative. You are already breathing the solution to every problem you're trying to solve with your mind. Not that breath will help you solve your problems. That it is the solution. Breathing itself. Breathing consciously. Breathing honestly. Breathing fully with what's real. Your anxiety? It's not asking you to understand it better, analyze it more, figure out its root cause. It's asking you to breathe into the spaces you've made small. It's inviting you to expand, to take up the room you've been afraid to occupy, to receive the life you've been rationing yourself to tiny sips of. Anxiety is compressed life force. Breathe space into it and it transforms into available energy. Your sadness? It's not asking you to get over it or think positive or understand why you're sad. It's teaching you the exhale you've been refusing, the release of what you cannot control, the letting go of how you thought life should be so you can finally meet how it actually is. Sadness breathed becomes grief. Grief breathed becomes space. Space breathed becomes availability for what's next. But you have to exhale it. You have to let it move through you instead of trying to hold it in or push it away. Your disconnection, that feeling of being behind glass, watching your life instead of living it. It's the natural result of living in your head while your body breathes alone, waiting for your return. You've been having a conversation with yourself, about yourself, analyzing your experience instead of having it, narrating your life instead of living it. And your breath has been there all along, loyal, patient, true, waiting for you to notice that the life you're seeking is already happening in every moment you're breathing. The wisdom isn't complicated. It's so simple it sounds stupid when you first hear it. Talk to your breath and it will obey, not because you command it like a master commands a slave, but because you finally listen to what it's been saying your whole life, because you finally stop abandoning it, stop fighting it, stop treating it as irrelevant background noise while you focus on what you think really matters. Your breath will show you what you're holding. Every tightness, every restriction, every shallow place, every held moment is marking something. A held experience, a suppressed truth, a refused feeling, an unspoken word. Your breath is mapping your unconscious with perfect accuracy, showing you exactly where you're lying to yourself, where you're pretending, where you're hiding. Follow the restriction and you'll find what you've been avoiding. That topic that makes your breath catch, there's something there you need to look at. That memory that stops your inhale, there's something unfinished. That desire you can't breathe into fully, There's shame there, or fear, or some belief about what you deserve that needs to be examined. And follow the openness, the places where your breath flows freely, and you'll find what you've been longing for. The activities that make you breathe deeply and easily, that's where your aliveness is. The people you can breathe fully around, those are your people. The places where your whole body relaxes and your breath opens, that's where you belong. Your breath will reveal what you're avoiding, not through analysis, not through understanding, just through honest observation. The topics that make your breath change, the situations that make you start holding, the memories you can't breathe with, the dreams you won't let yourself inhale. It's all there, all visible, if you pay attention. Your breath will guide you to the truth beneath your stories. You have narratives about your life, explanations for why you are the way you are, reasons for your struggles, justifications for your choices. Some of these stories are helpful. They give meaning, create coherence, help you make sense of your experience. But many are prisons, stories you tell yourself to avoid feeling what you feel, to justify staying stuck, to explain away your responsibility for your own life. Your breath doesn't care about your stories. It doesn't participate in your narratives. It simply responds to what's true right now, in this moment, in this body. When your story says you're fine but your breath is tight and shallow, trust the breath. When your mind says you should be over something but your breath catches when you think about it, trust the breath. When you tell yourself you don't care but your breath says you do, trust the breath. The breath is more honest than thought, more reliable than memory, more truthful than the image you show the world. It's the direct line to what's real, bypassing all your defenses, all your strategies, all your carefully constructed presentations. Learn to read it and you have access to truth that no amount of thinking can give you. I've spent 50 years helping people find their way home to themselves, sitting in rooms with suffering humans, listening to their dreams, analyzing their symptoms, watching them struggle to change. And I can tell you this with absolute certainty, with the weight of decades of clinical experience behind it, the ones who healed weren't the ones who understood their problems best. They weren't the smartest or the most educated or the most psychologically sophisticated. They weren't the ones who could give the most articulate explanations of their patterns or the most detailed analyses of their childhood. They were the ones who learned to breathe with their truth instead of around it. They were the ones who stopped using analysis as a defense and started using awareness as a doorway. You can spend years, decades even, talking about your wounds, understanding your patterns, analyzing your dynamics, excavating your history. And this has value. I'm not saying understanding doesn't matter. Consciousness matters. Insight matters. But consciousness without breath is just more thinking. It's understanding the cage while staying inside it. It's describing your prison in ever more sophisticated language while remaining imprisoned. Breath brings you into your body, into the present moment, into the actual felt experience of being alive right now. And that's where healing happens. Not in the understanding of the wound, not in the analysis of the pattern, not in the narrative about why you are the way you are, in the breathing through it. In the moment when you can finally inhale what you've been refusing, exhale what you've been holding, and let your organism complete what's been frozen inside you. So here is what I want you to remember, to carry with you, to write down if you need to come back to when you forget, because you will forget. We all do. We get caught up in our minds, in our stories, in the endless exhausting task of trying to fix ourselves with thinking. And when you notice that happening, when you catch yourself back in the loop, spinning in your head, lost in analysis, come back to this. I am not broken. I am holding my breath against life itself. That's it. That's the core insight. You're not fundamentally flawed. You're not damaged beyond repair. You're not missing some crucial piece that other people have. You're holding your breath, literally and metaphorically, against feeling too much, wanting too much, being too much, taking up too much space, needing too much, asking for too much. Every inhale is permission to receive what I deserve, not what I've earned through suffering or sacrifice, not what I've worked hard enough to merit, what I deserve simply by being alive, by being a breathing organism on this planet. Oxygen, nourishment, pleasure, love, beauty, rest, joy. Your inhale is practice in receiving, in letting life give to you, in accepting that you are worthy of being filled just because you exist. Every exhale is courage to release what I cannot control. Your exhale is practice in letting go, in trusting that emptiness isn't death, in surrendering to the flow of life instead of trying to manage every moment, predict every outcome, control every variable. You cannot control your way to peace. You can only breathe your way there, one release at a time, learning over and over that you can let go and still be okay, still be here, still be held. My breath knows the way home. Not your mind with all its knowledge and strategies and plans, not your will with all its force and determination. Your breath. It's older than your thoughts, wiser than your fears, more reliable than your understanding. It's been keeping you alive since before you had language, and it will guide you if you let it, if you trust it, if you follow it. This isn't just philosophy. This isn't just a nice idea to contemplate. This is the most practical thing I can tell you, the most useful guidance I can offer. When you don't know what to do, breathe. When you're overwhelmed, breathe. When you're lost and confused and terrified, breathe. Not as an escape from the difficulty, not as a way to avoid what you're feeling, but as a way to meet it more fully, to be with it more completely, to let it move through you instead of getting stuck inside you. Your breath will show you what to do next. It will show you what's true. It will show you the way through. Not always immediately, not always clearly, but if you keep listening, keep following, keep trusting, it will guide you. Because your breath is connected to something deeper than your conscious mind, something wiser than your ego, something that knows how to heal because it's been healing you since you were born. And here's what nobody tells you. What took me a lifetime of work to fully understand. What I wish someone had told me when I was that boy lying awake suffocating in Vienna. The revolution isn't in fixing yourself. You're not broken. You don't need to be fixed. You need to be freed. Freed from the prison of held breath, freed from the tyranny of acceptable feelings, freed from the exhausting work of managing your image and controlling your expression and keeping the unacceptable parts of yourself locked away. The revolution is in breathing yourself back to wholeness. You've been fragmented, split between the acceptable parts and the shadow parts, the conscious and the unconscious, the civilized mask and the animal truth, the good feelings and the bad feelings, the parts you show and the parts you hide. And you've used your breath to maintain that split, to keep the unacceptable parts locked away in the darkness, where they can't embarrass you or get you in trouble, or make you feel things you don't want to feel. But your breath can also reunify you. When you breathe fully, when you let the breath move through all of you, upper chest and heart and belly, conscious and unconscious, acceptable and forbidden, civilized and wild, you become whole again, not perfect, not without problems, not some ideal version of yourself that never struggles, whole, complete, integrated. All of you breathing together instead of parts of you trying to suffocate other parts of you. This is what I've been trying to tell you from the very beginning, what everything else has been building toward. The power you're seeking isn't somewhere else. It's not in the future after you've done enough work, read enough books, been to enough therapy, achieved enough success, healed enough wounds. It's not in some achievement or relationship or circumstance that will finally make you okay. It's in your next breath, and the one after that, and the one after that. Every breath is an opportunity to choose life over death, expansion over contraction, truth over comfort, wholeness over fragmentation. Every breath is a chance to return home to yourself, to inhabit your body, to be present to your life as it actually is, instead of as you think it should be. You've been living on the surface of yourself, skimming along the top, managing your image, controlling your expression, keeping everything contained and acceptable. And there's a depth below that surface that you've barely touched, not because you're not capable of it, not because you're not ready for it, but because you've been taught that depth is dangerous, that if you really feel everything, really let yourself be fully alive, it will destroy you or destroy your life as you know it. And you know what? It might destroy your life as you know it. I'm not going to lie to you. It might. Breathing fully, living fully, being fully yourself might crack open the life you've carefully constructed. It might make your compromises visible. It might make it impossible to keep pretending that everything is fine when it's not. It might make you unable to tolerate situations you've been tolerating for years. But your life as you know it is probably too small anyway. It's probably a compromise you made so long ago you can't even remember making it. It's probably a version of yourself that fit other people's expectations but never quite fit you. And yes, breathing fully, living fully, being fully yourself might crack that life open like an egg. But what if that's exactly what needs to happen? What if the thing you're most afraid of, the dissolution of the life you've carefully constructed, the end of the compromises you've been maintaining, is actually the doorway to the life you're meant to live? What if your breath is trying to break you out of a prison you've mistaken for safety? I'm not saying blow up your life recklessly. I'm not saying be impulsive or destructive. I'm saying breathe honestly, breathe fully, and let your breath show you what's true. And then, breath by breath, choice by choice, decision by decision, build a life that you can breathe fully in. A life where you don't have to hold yourself in. Where you don't have to suppress half of who you are, where your breath can move freely because you're living in alignment with your deepest truth. This is the work. Not fixing what's broken, but breathing space into what's been compressed. Not achieving some perfect state, but returning again and again to the simple, profound aliveness of breathing consciously. Not understanding everything, but trusting the intelligence of the body, the wisdom of the breath, the guidance of the unconscious that speaks through every inhale and exhale. You are going to forget this. You're going to go back to living in your head, trying to think your way through everything, getting caught in anxiety or depression or numbness or whatever your particular pattern is. That's okay. That's not failure. That's human. The practice isn't to never forget. The practice is to remember, to notice when you've abandoned your breath and come back, to notice when you're holding and release, to notice when you're shallow and deepen. Every moment is a new moment. Every breath is a chance to begin again. You don't have to be perfect at this. You don't have to do it right. You don't even have to do it most of the time. You just have to keep coming back, keep paying attention, keep choosing to breathe with your life instead of around it. And over time, slowly, gradually, sometimes so subtly you don't even notice it happening, something shifts. Not because you've mastered anything, not because you've fixed all your problems or healed all your wounds or become enlightened, but because you've surrendered to the process. You've stopped fighting your breath and started following it. You've stopped trying to control your unconscious and started listening to it. You've stopped demanding that life be other than it is and started breathing with what is. And this is freedom. Not the absence of difficulty, not the elimination of pain, not some permanent state of bliss or peace or happiness, but the presence of breath with whatever's here, The capacity to breathe through pain without it destroying you. The ability to breathe with joy without fear of losing it. The practice of being alive, fully, honestly, completely, breath by breath, moment by moment. If this resonated with you, if you feel even slightly more connected to the wisdom breathing within you right now in this very moment, I'd be deeply grateful if you'd subscribe to this channel for more explorations of the human psyche, for more conversations about depth and truth, and what it means to be human beyond the surface level most of life operates on. We need these conversations. We desperately need spaces where we can talk about what's real, where we can go beneath the superficial, where we can explore the territory of being human with honesty and courage and compassion. Subscribe so you don't miss future videos where we'll continue this exploration together. Hit the like button to support this work reaching others who need it. Not because I need validation, not because I need your approval, but because there are people out there right now, in this moment, who are suffocating, who have forgotten how to breathe, who think their anxiety or depression or disconnection is permanent, is who they are, is something they'll carry forever. And maybe this video will find them. Maybe through the algorithm, through a friend sharing it, through some mysterious path we can't predict, these words will reach someone who needs them. Maybe it will remind them of what they already know, but have forgotten. Maybe it will be the thing that helps them take one full, honest breath. And that matters. That matters more than you know. And please, I'm asking you sincerely, drop a comment sharing your own experience. What did you notice about your breath as you listened to this? Did it change? Did you find yourself holding? Did you notice patterns you weren't aware of before? What surfaced for you? What truth is trying to breathe itself into existence in your life right now? What are you holding that wants to be released? I read every comment, every single one. And your insights often teach me as much as I hope I've taught you. Your experiences remind me that I'm not alone in this work, that we're in this together, this great human project of becoming conscious, of becoming whole, of learning to breathe ourselves back to life. We're all struggling with the same fundamental things, the same fears, the same longings, the same forgetting and remembering. Your comment might be exactly what someone else needs to hear, might give them permission to face what they're facing, might help them feel less alone. So share, be honest, let your voice be heard. Thank you for breathing with me today. Thank you for your attention, your openness, your willingness to question what you think you know and explore what you might discover. Thank you for being here now. Alive, breathing, seeking truth. That matters more than you can possibly know. Your presence here, your attention, your willingness to go deep, it matters. Until next time, until we meet again in this strange, intimate space that technology makes possible, remember this: you already have everything you need. Everything. You're not missing anything. You're not lacking anything. You're not broken in any fundamental way. You're just holding your breath against what you already have. The revolution is in your next breath. Not the breath after you've done more work. Not the breath after you've figured everything out. Not the breath after you've become who you think you need to be. Your next breath. This one. Right now. Take it. Take it fully. Let it fill you completely. Let it show you what's true. Let it guide you home. Your breath is speaking right now, in this moment. Always speaking, always broadcasting, always showing you what's real. If you'll only listen. Are you listening? Can you hear it? Can you feel it moving through you? This ancient rhythm, this primal wisdom, this faithful guide that's been with you since your first moment and will be with you until your last. Listen to your breath. Trust your breath. Follow your breath. Talk to your breath, and it will obey. not because you're controlling it, but because you've finally stopped abandoning it. Because you've finally come home to the one thing that's been home all along. Breathe. Just breathe. Fully, honestly, consciously, and let everything else follow from that. Let your life reorganize itself around that simple, profound practice of breathing with what's real instead of holding your breath against it. The revolution is breathing. The healing is breathing. The freedom is breathing. The wholeness is breathing. And you're already doing it. You're already breathing. You just need to do it consciously, do it honestly, do it fully, and everything changes. Your breath knows the way. Trust it. Follow it home.